That morning began like any other. He woke up before the alarm, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside his window. Nothing about the day felt special. He brushed his teeth, drank a cup of plain coffee, and scrolled through the news on his phone. The headlines were the same as always: politics, weather, small arguments between powerful people that never touched his real life. He felt invisible, the way he often did, like one more face in a crowd that never noticed him. He left his apartment and walked to work. The air was cool, and people moved quickly, each lost in their own thoughts. No one spoke to him. No one looked at him for more than a second. That was normal. He was used to being unnoticed. It wasn't painful anymore, just a quiet fact of life. Then, without warning, the sky changed. Not at first. It was just a shadow. People slowed down, confused, looking at the ground as daylight dimmed. Someone pointed upward. Others followed. The shadow kept growing, swallowing buildings, streets, and entire neighborhoods. A deep sound filled the air, not loud, but heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. He looked up. Above the city hovered something impossible. A massive object, smooth and dark, shaped in a way no human machine ever was. It didn't move like an airplane or a drone. It simply existed, calm and unmoving, as if it had always belonged there. The street erupted into noise. People screamed. Cars stopped in the middle of the road. Phones were lifted into the air as everyone tried to record proof that this was real. Sirens began to wail from every direction. His heart raced. His hands shook. Every thought in his mind told him to run, but his feet wouldn't move. He felt small, like an ant staring at a mountain that had suddenly appeared from nowhere. Screens across the city lit up billboards, phones public displays. A message appeared, translated into every human language at once. The words were simple. We come in peace. We request one human representative. The world froze. News channels switched to non-stop coverage. Governments issued emergency statements. Military vehicles rolled through the streets. People prayed, argued, cried, and hugged strangers. Some believed it was a trick. Others believed the end had come. He went home early, unable to focus on work. He sat on his couch, watching everything unfold. He felt fear, yes, but also something else: curiosity. The message didn't sound threatening. It sounded calm. Hours later, another message appeared. The representative has been selected. His phone buzzed. At first, he thought it was a mistake. He read the message again and again. His name, his address, instructions. He laughed, a short, nervous sound. Out of billions of people, why him? He wasn't important. He wasn't brave. He wasn't special. A knock came at his door. Outside stood officials in dark uniforms, their faces tense but respectful. They spoke carefully, as if afraid he might disappear if they startled him. They explained that the selection seemed random. There was no reason given, no appeal process. The alien craft had specified him alone. His mouth went dry. He wanted to say no. He wanted to close the door and pretend none of this was happening. But he knew refusal wasn't really an option. The world was watching, even if he couldn't see them. He packed a small bag, hands trembling. He called a family member, tried to explain, failed, apologized for things that didn't make sense. When he stepped outside, the street was filled with people staring at him like he was already history. A helicopter carried him to a secured area outside the city. The craft loomed overhead, even larger up close. Its surface reflected the sky, almost like water. A narrow opening appeared. Silently, he took a deep breath and stepped inside. The interior was quiet and bright, but not blinding. The air felt clean, lighter than Earth's. He expected cold metal and harsh lights, but instead everything felt smooth and warm, almost welcoming. He was guided forward without being touched. Shapes moved around him, beings taller than humans, elegant in their movements, their eyes sharp but not cruel. They watched him with interest, not hunger or anger. Then he saw her. She stood apart from the others, commanding attention without effort. She was clearly their leader. Her presence filled the room, not through size or force, but through certainty. Her eyes large, luminous. An unsettling settled on him. Time seemed to slow. For the first time in his life, he felt truly seen. Not judged, not measured, seen. She studied him in silence. He felt exposed, like every fear, every lonely night, every quiet disappointment was visible on his face. He expected questions about Earth, about governments, about weapons. Instead, her voice echoed gently in his mind, perfectly translated. "Are you single, human?" The room fell silent. He blinked, sure he had misunderstood. His heart pounded so loudly, he thought everyone could hear it. Of all the questions he imagined, this was not one of them. He swallowed and answered honestly, because lying felt impossible in that moment. Yes? A ripple passed through the beings around her. Not shock, but recognition. The Queen's gaze softened, just slightly. "Good," she said. Confusion flooded him. Fear mixed with something dangerously close to warmth. This was not an interrogation. This was something else. She explained, slowly, carefully. Her people had crossed vast distances not to conquer, but to understand. Their society valued logic and order, but it suffered from deep isolation. Leadership was powerful, but lonely. Emotional connection was rare, almost forgotten. She had observed Earth for a long time. Humans were chaotic, fragile, emotional. But they connected. They loved. They lived fully, even knowing life was short. When she looked at him, she saw no ambition, no hunger for power. She saw honesty, emptiness mixed with hope. A life shaped by being overlooked. That was why he was chosen. His knees felt weak. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't brave. He was just himself. Back on Earth, the world held its breath. Analysts argued. Commentators speculated. Some mocked him. Some feared for him. Some pinned their hopes on him without his consent. Inside the craft, he realized his life had already changed forever. The question she asked was simple, but it carried weight far beyond romance or curiosity. It was a doorway, a test, a beginning. And as he stood there, under an alien sky, he understood one quiet truth. The most ordinary life can become extraordinary in a single moment when someone truly sees you and asks a question that changes everything. He couldn't believe what had just happened. One moment, he was an ordinary person in a city full of strangers, and the next, he was standing in front of a being from another world, a being who asked a question that made his heart stop. "Are you single, human?" He kept repeating it in his mind. It didn't make sense. It wasn't something he expected from a leader of an alien civilization. Yet, somehow, it carried weight, a seriousness that left no room for joking or confusion. After a few moments of silence, the alien queen spoke again. Her voice was calm but firm, filling the space around him, not loud, not demanding, just present. "Do not be afraid. We do not wish to harm you. You are here to understand, to learn, and perhaps to teach us as well." He nodded, though his mind raced. Fear was still there, gnawing at his stomach. But now it was joined by curiosity. How could he teach someone so powerful, someone so different, about being human? And what did they really want from him? She gestured toward a large space beyond the room. It looked like a hall, but not like any building he had ever seen. The walls shimmered, reflecting light like liquid metal, but soft and warm. The floor was smooth, but he didn't hear his own footsteps. It was as if the place was aware of him, listening to him, reacting to him. He realized that every detail of the craft seemed alive, not just machines, not just walls, but something in between. "Follow me," she said as he walked beside her. He noticed the other beings moving around them. They didn't speak, but their presence was careful, respectful. It was like they understood that he was fragile, that he was human, that he did not belong here, but somehow, that was exactly why he was here. They reached a space that looked like a library, though it was unlike any library on Earth. There were no shelves, no books. Instead, there were panels of light that floated in the air. Each panel displayed images, words, and sounds all at once. He realized that this was their way of learning. Everything recorded, everything visible, everything accessible with just thought and focus. She stopped in the middle of the room. "We have observed your planet for a long time," she said. "We have seen your wars, your kindness, your art, your mistakes. We are aware of what it means to be human. But observation is not the same as understanding. That is why we chose you." He blinked. "Me? Why me?" Her gaze softened. "Because you are ordinary. And in being ordinary, you carry truth. You have lived without power, without wealth, without fame. You have lived as a human experiences life, its struggles, its fears, its moments of hope. That is something rare to see from your world, something we want to understand. Not your knowledge, not your skills, but your perspective. The way you feel, the way you think, the way you care." He swallowed hard. He had never felt special in his life, never felt that anyone would see him as important. And now, a being from another world, more powerful and intelligent than anyone he could imagine, was telling him he was exactly what they needed. For the first time, he felt something that resembled pride, though it was mingled with anxiety. Could he really live up to that expectation? Could he explain what it meant to be human to someone who had never known? The Queen led him further into the craft. They stopped at a window, or what looked like a window, but it didn't show space as he knew it. Instead, it displayed Earth, cities, forests, oceans, and deserts, all alive with motion and light. She pointed toward a small town he recognized from the news, and then toward a remote village, and even toward the ocean, where ships moved like tiny insects. "Your world is beautiful, fragile, and unpredictable," she said. "We have learned much, but we have not truly understood why humans act the way they do. We wish to know what makes your species continue, despite suffering and mistakes, despite fear and uncertainty." He looked at the earth below and felt a sudden surge of connection. All his ordinary life, every lonely day, every struggle, suddenly seemed like it had purpose. Maybe this was why he had been chosen. Maybe his life, mundane as it was, carried the answers they sought. Can I help?" he asked, unsure if his words would even make sense. "Yes," she replied. "By being honest. By showing what it means to feel, to hope, to fear, to love. That is what we cannot see on our own." They spent hours or maybe days, he couldn't tell, talking. She asked him about small things, things he never thought were important. What he liked to eat, what made him laugh, what scared him at night. She listened with intensity, as if every word mattered. Then the questions became harder. She asked about pain, about loss, about loneliness. She asked about moments when he had failed, moments when he had felt invisible or unwanted. He hesitated, but he spoke honestly, because lying felt meaningless. She never judged, never mocked, never pushed him to perform. She simply listened, and sometimes she nodded. Sometimes she tilted her head slightly, and he felt like she understood more than he could explain. He began to notice subtle things about her too. Despite her power, her elegance, her otherworldly presence, there was loneliness in her eyes. A loneliness he recognized. Not the kind that comes from being alone for a day, but a deep, heavy loneliness that comes from responsibility, from carrying the weight of others, lives without anyone who truly understands. He realized then that her question, the first one she asked him, was not a joke. It wasn't curiosity or casual conversation. She asked because she, too, had been alone for a long time. And perhaps, in him, she saw something she had been missing. Not just companionship, not just another person, but the honesty and humanity that could bridge the impossible distance between her world and his. The more they spoke, the more he began to understand her. She was not a monster, not a conqueror, not even fully alien in the way he expected. She was a being who ruled, yes, but also suffered, loved, and wondered. And for the first time, he saw her not as someone terrifying, but as someone needing the same simple truths he had always needed: understanding, honesty, and connection. Back on Earth, the world continued to watch, to debate, to fear. News anchors spoke of treaties, of political crises, of the potential dangers of his presence. Analysts wrote endless articles trying to understand why one human had been chosen. But none of that reached him here. Inside the craft, the world he had known felt distant, almost irrelevant. What mattered now was the conversation, the connection, and the understanding that seemed to grow between them. Slowly, word by word, days passed, though time felt different aboard the ship. He began to notice patterns in her speech, in the way her people moved. He saw moments of vulnerability in her, and she began to ask him questions about life on Earth that went beyond facts, questions about friendship, love, failure, hope. She wanted the small things, the subtle truths that made humans human. And with each answer, he realized that he was changing too. He was no longer the invisible man in the city streets. He was seen. He was needed. He was learning to trust not only her, but himself. One day, she asked him something that stopped him completely. Do humans ever feel that they are too ordinary to matter? He nodded, slowly. All the time, he said. Most of the time, we just keep going anyway. Because that's what we have to do. She studied him in silence. Then your life is braver than any act of courage we know, she said. He didn't know how to respond. No one had ever said anything like that to him. He felt a lump in his throat, and a warmth he couldn't describe. He realized that courage wasn't always in battles or achievements. It could be in simply living. Simply being honest, simply feeling, and continuing to hope despite everything. As their conversations deepened, he noticed that she seemed more relaxed around him. She smiled sometimes, though it was subtle, almost imperceptible. She made small gestures that reminded him of people on Earth. A tilt of the head, a soft exhale, a pause in thought. And with each passing moment, the question she had asked him at the beginning, the one that made his heart stop, felt less like a test and more like the beginning of something neither of them fully understood yet. And in that quiet, alien space, he realized something incredible. That ordinary humans, the ones overlooked and underestimated every day, could carry something extraordinary: connection, understanding, honesty. And perhaps, if he and the alien queen could share those things, it could change not just their lives, but the fate of two worlds. He wasn't sure what the next step would be. He wasn't sure if he could ever go back to his old life. But for the first time in his life, he felt seen, understood, and needed in a way he never imagined. And that, he realized, was the most human feeling of all. He had spent what felt like endless days aboard the craft, yet each day passed in a blur of conversations, observations, and small moments of connection. The alien queen had stopped asking him questions as if testing him. Instead, they spoke freely, sharing thoughts and feelings. He had learned more about her world, her people, and the enormous responsibilities she carried than anyone could imagine. And in turn, she had learned about his life, about Earth, about humans not as statistics or news reports, but as lived experiences, small truths, joys, and pains. But the weight of choice had begun to press heavily on him. Being here had opened his eyes in ways he never expected. He understood now that his life would never return to what it had been. He could not go back to streets filled with strangers who didn't notice him, to offices where his presence meant nothing, to a world that had seemed too ordinary to matter. The Queen noticed his hesitation. Her luminous eyes, so piercing yet kind, searched his face. "You are thinking of returning," she said softly. "Do not lie to yourself." He shook his head. I don't know if I can stay. I don't know if I can leave. Everything I've known is behind me, but everything ahead. It's terrifying." She nodded slowly, as if she understood every unspoken thought. "We did not bring you here to force a decision. We only asked you to see, to feel, and to decide what matters to you most." He thought of Earth, its chaos, its beauty, its imperfections. He thought of lonely nights, fleeting friendships, moments of laughter, and the small acts of kindness that had always gone unnoticed. And then he thought of her and her people, of a world so vast, so different, yet so filled with curiosity and longing for connection. He began, struggling for words. "I don't know if I'm brave enough for this. I'm just human, ordinary. I've never done anything important in my life." The Queen smiled, but it was not a condescending smile. It was understanding, patient. "It is precisely because you are human and ordinary that you are capable of extraordinary things. Courage is not always about fighting or winning. Sometimes it is about honesty, about facing fear, about choosing what is right even when it is difficult." He stared at her, feeling the truth of her words settle in his chest. Fear had been a constant companion in his life, but now it felt different, sharp, yes, but alive, like a reminder that he still had a choice. And with choice came responsibility that he could not ignore. Days turned into a rhythm of teaching and learning. She asked about human emotions, the small ways people expressed love, trust, and care. He told her about laughter that could lift spirits, about the comfort of a quiet conversation, about sorrow that could bind people together. She listened, taking it all in with an intensity that made him feel seen in ways he never had before. Then came a day that changed everything. The Queen led him to a part of the craft he had not seen before. It was a chamber that overlooked the stars, a vast expanse of glowing lights. Far beyond Earth, the stars seemed closer here, brighter, as if the universe itself was welcoming him. She turned to him. "You have a choice," she said, her voice steady but gentle. "You may return to your world. It will be unchanged, and you will live the life you once knew. Or you may stay, and we will learn together, live together, and perhaps shape the future of both our peoples. The decision is yours alone." He felt the weight of the moment like a stone pressing on his chest. The life he knew was simple, safe, and familiar. But the life he could have here extraordinary, full of connection, with the chance to make a difference on a scale he had never imagined, was terrifying. He thought of the people he had loved and lost, of the moments he had wasted worrying about being invisible. And he realized that this opportunity, however impossible it seemed, was a chance to matter, to be seen, to be part of something greater than himself. But there was also fear. What would it mean to leave Earth behind? Could he survive among beings so different, so powerful, so alien? Could he carry the responsibility of bridging two worlds? His heart pounded at the thought, and he felt tears rise unbidden. Not from sorrow, but from the intensity of the choice before him. The Queen reached out, a small gesture, and placed her hand near his, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth, the presence. "There is no right answer," she said. "Only what you can live with. Only what your heart can bear." He closed his eyes and remembered every small detail of his life on Earth. The sun rising over rooftops, the taste of fresh bread, the quiet sound of rain on the window, the laughter of friends, the fleeting moments of joy that had seemed insignificant. And then he thought of her people, the vastness of space, the unknown, the potential for understanding and connection that could change everything. When he opened his eyes, he knew what he had to do. Not because it was easy, not because he was fearless, but because he had learned what mattered most: honesty, courage, and the chance to connect, to bridge worlds, to matter. I will stay," he said, his voice trembling but firm. The Queen's eyes softened, and she nodded. "Then we begin," she said. The days that followed were not easy. Learning the ways of her people, understanding their language, their habits, their thinking, it was challenging, sometimes exhausting. He struggled, stumbled, felt frustration and doubt. But each day he persisted, and with each step he grew stronger, not just in knowledge, but in confidence, in the realization that he was capable of more than he had ever imagined. He discovered that connection was the most powerful tool of all. By sharing stories, emotions, and truths, he helped her people understand the human heart. And in return, they showed him the vast possibilities of the universe, technologies, ideas, and ways of seeing the world that stretched his imagination beyond anything he had known. Months passed, and he found a rhythm, a place in this extraordinary world. He was no longer the invisible man from Earth, nor merely a guest. He had become a bridge, a witness, a teacher, and a learner. He laughed, he wondered, he hoped, and sometimes he even cried. All the things that made him human, all the things that had seemed ordinary, were now extraordinary because they mattered. And through it all, the Queen remained beside him, not as a ruler commanding obedience, but as someone who shared the weight of responsibility, someone who understood the fragile, fleeting, and powerful beauty of life. She still asked questions, not to test him, but to learn from him. She still watched him, not to control, but to see. And slowly, something grew between them: trust, respect, and a quiet understanding that crossed the impossible distance between worlds. One day, he looked back at Earth through a view of the craft. He could see the continents, the oceans, the cities bustling with life. And he realized that he missed it, not the chaos, not the fear, not the struggles, but the simple reality of being human, living among other humans, feeling every emotion as they did. He also realized that he could carry both worlds in his heart. Earth would always be home, a part of him, just as this alien civilization had become home. He had learned that courage was not leaving behind what you love, but choosing to embrace the unknown, to face fear, and to connect where it matters most. The Queen turned to him, her gaze calm and deep. "Do you regret your choice?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "No, I'm scared, yes, but I'm ready. I've never felt more alive." And in that moment, he understood the truth that had been growing inside him since the day he first arrived. Being human was not about strength, or intelligence, or power. It was about honesty, hope, and the willingness to connect, to feel, to live fully even when life was uncertain. The Queen smiled, a small, radiant gesture, and the weight of the universe seemed to lighten. Together, they stepped forward, not as ruler and visitor, not as human and alien, but as two beings learning to bridge worlds, carrying the extraordinary potential of life, connection, and understanding into a future neither could have imagined alone. And as he looked out at the stars, he realized that the most ordinary person could do extraordinary things, if only they were seen, if only they chose to act. And if only they embraced the unknown with courage, honesty, and an open heart.